खबरां दा लेखा जोखा विच आप सब दा स्वागत है।
Khabran Da Lekha Jokha November 4, 2024 has been sponsored by Hanif Litigation. Any criminal or regulatory law matters, contact lawyer Shahid Hanif at 604-626-3144. Hanif Litigation. Shorter, darker days for BC as clocks fall back. Over the weekend, clocks fell back an hour to mark the end of daylight savings time, and it's not going over well with a lot of people. We hit the streets to find out how people were taking it all in, and many don't feel we should be doing it any longer. I'm totally against it. I think that it messes with our clocks. I think it's completely unnecessary, added another woman. I'm against it, said one man. I think there's no reason whatsoever in the modern era. I think we can make our lives much easier and reduce a lot of accidents. Typically, this time of year, there are a lot of crashes reported thanks to the shorter, darker days and the rainy, stormy weather that comes with it. I'm against it because I think it screws up people's sleep schedules, said one man. I mean, it's kind of fun tradition to change every year, but beyond that, I don't think it's much use anymore, added another. Some said to combat the yawns, droopy eyelids, and dreams of crawling back into a bed, warm, cozy bed, they would increase their caffeine intake. Others suggested they would go to bed early every night, especially in the first week after the time change, to deal with the fatigue. Others said they were looking at it through a balanced lens. I'm probably in between, this woman chuckled. When it's forward, it feels like your time is being taken back from you, but when it's back, it's equalizing things. One woman had a relatable outlook on the time change. Waking up and it being dark, I'm excited for it this year because I'm tired. Sunset on Monday across the region will hit around 4:45 p.m. and if you are already missing warm sunny days, our clocks will spring forward an hour on March 9th of 2025.
छोटे दिन ते हनेरे ਜਿਹੜੇ ਹਨੇਰੇ ਦਾ ਜਲਦੀ ਹੋ ਜਾਣਾ ਔਰ ਉਸ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਸਮੇਂ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਆਈ ਹੋਈ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਤਬਦੀਲੀ ਆ 1 ਘੰਟੇ ਦੇ ਫਰਕ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਉਸ ਦੇ ਬਾਰੇ ਲੋਕਾਂ ਦੇ ਅਲੱਗ-ਅਲੱਗ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਦੇ ਵਿਚਾਰ ਨੇ। ਕਈਆਂ ਨੂੰ ਬਿਲਕੁਲ ਇਹ ਪਸੰਦ ਨਹੀਂ, ਕਈਆਂ ਦਾ ਕਹਿਣਾ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਇਹ ਇੱਕ ਤਰੀਕੇ ਨਾਲ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਚਾਨਣਾ ਉਸ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਕਮੀ ਔਰ ਹਨੇਰਾ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਉਸ ਦਾ ਜਲਦੀ ਹੋ ਜਾਣਾ ਔਰ ਇਸ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਗੱਲਾਂ ਕਈ ਹੋਰ ਸਾਹਮਣੇ ਆਈਆਂ ਨੇ ਕਿ ਇਹ ਕਲੌਕ ਦੇ ਚੇਂਜਸ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਕਿਸ ਪ੍ਰਕਾਰ ਲੋਕਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਮਾਨਸਿਕ ਤੌਰ ਦੇ ਉੱਤੇ ਡਿਸਟਰਬੈਂਸ ਹੁੰਦੀ ਹੈ। ਇਸ ਸਮੇਂ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਐਕਸੀਡੈਂਟਸ ਨੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਵੀ बढ़ोतरी ਹੁੰਦੀ ਹੈ ਔਰ ਕੀ ਜ਼ਰੂਰੀ ਹੈ ਜਾਂ ਨਹੀਂ ਇਸ ਬਾਰੇ ਸਾਲ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ 2 ਵਾਰੀ ਚਰਚਾ ਜ਼ਰੂਰ ਛਿੜਦੀ ਹੈ।
BC Port lookout to begin as no deal reached in labor disputes with foreman union. The province-wide lockout against a union of more than 700 foremen at all British Columbia ports is expected to begin at 8 a.m. The BC Maritime Employers Union has said the lockout is meant to facilitate a safe and orderly wind down of operations in light of escalating and unpredictable strike action. Last week, it said the move was being made defensively after the International Longshore and Warehouse Union Local 514 had issued a 72-hour strike notice for job action, which also starts at 8 a.m. The union has accused the association of acting recklessly by threatening the industry-wide lockout, saying it was an attempt to force the federal government to intervene in this dispute. The Employers Association said in a statement Sunday that the final offer, which was issued to the union's president on Wednesday, remained open and that if it were acceptable by the union, it would avoid unnecessary strike action. Union President Frank Morena said in a news release Sunday that the employers had threatened to remove existing parts of the collective agreement if the union did not accept its final offer. Let me be crystal clear to the BCMEA, our union will not sign any contract which includes concessions that remove existing parts of our collective agreement that our members fought long and hard for over many years, Morena said.
ਇਹ ਜੀ ਪੋਰਟ ਦੇ ਕੰਮ ਕਰਨ ਵਾਲੇ ਫੋਰਮੈਨਸ ਨੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਯੂਨੀਅਨ 514 ਨੰਬਰ ਦੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਪਾਰਟਿਸਪੈਂਟਸ ਨੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਵੱਲੋਂ ਅੱਜ 8 ਵਜੇ ਤੋਂ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਸਟ੍ਰਾਈਕ ਹੈ ਉਸ ਦੀ ਸ਼ੁਰੂਆਤ ਹੈ ਉਸ ਦੇ ਬਾਰੇ ਗੱਲਬਾਤ ਨਸ਼ਰ ਹੋਈ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਕਿਸ ਪ੍ਰਕਾਰ ਪੋਰਟ ਦੇ ਉੱਤੇ ਕੰਮ ਕਰਨ ਵਾਲੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਫੋਰਮੈਨ ਨੇ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਦਾ ਕਹਿਣਾ ਕਿ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦੀ ਯੂਨੀਅਨ ਵੱਲੋਂ ਪ੍ਰਮਾਣਿਤ ਹੀ ਸਮਝੌਤਾ ਹੈਗਾ ਉਸ ਨੂੰ ਇਹ ਮੰਨਣਗੇ ਤੇ ਯਾਦ ਰਹੇ ਇਹ ਸਟ੍ਰਾਈਕ ਦਾ ਵੱਡੀ ਪੱਧਰ ਦੇ ਉੱਤੇ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਅਫੈਕਟ ਹੋਣਾ ਆਰਥਿਕ ਢਾਂਚੇ ਦੇ ਉੱਤੇ ਪੂਰੀ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਨਿਯਮਤ ਹੈ.
The best that we can be, Indigenous judge and TRC chair Murray Sinclair dies at 73. Murray Sinclair, who was born when Indigenous people did not yet have the right to vote, grew up to become one of the most decorated and influential people to work in Indigenous justice and advocacy. A former judge and senator, one of Sinclair's biggest roles was chair of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission into residential schools. The father of 5 died peacefully Monday morning in a Winnipeg hospital, said a statement from his family. He was 73. Mazina Gezek, the one who speaks of pictures in the sky, committed his life in service to the people, creating change, revealing truth, and leading with fairness throughout his career, said the statement, noting his traditional Anishinaabe name. The impact of our dad's work reached across the country and the world, from residential school survivors to law schools students to those who sat across from him in a courtroom. He was always known as an exceptional listener who treated everyone with dignity and respect. A sacred fire to help guide his spirits home has been lit outside the Manitoba legislature, said the family. Born in 1951, Sinclair was raised on the former St. Peter's Indian Reserve north of Winnipeg. He was a member of Peguis First Nation. He was raised by his grandparents and graduated from a high school in Shulkirk, Man, where he excelled in athletics. Some of his earliest childhood memories were published earlier this year in his memoir, Who Are We? 4 Questions for a Life and a Nation. In it, Sinclair described discrimination he experienced being Anishinaabe in a non-Indigenous school. While I and others succeeded in that system, it was not without cost to our own humanity and our sense of self-respect. These are the legacies all of us find ourselves in today. Sinclair later worked as an assistant to legislature member Howard Pauli before Pauli became premier. In 1979, Sinclair graduated law school at the University of Manitoba. In 11 years, he became the first Indigenous judge in Manitoba, the second in Canada. When he was appointed an associate chief judge of the provincial court in 2001, he rose to what was then called the Court of Queen's Bench. In all, he spent 28 years as a judge. He served as co-chair of the Aboriginal Justice Inquiry of Manitoba to examine whether the justice system was failing Indigenous people after the murder of Helen Betty Osborne and the police shooting death of J.J. Harper. He also directed the complex pediatric cardiac surgery inquest into the deaths of 12 children at Winnipeg's Health Science Centre. In leading the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, he participated in hundreds of hearings across Canada and heard testimony from thousands of residential school survivors. The commissioners released their widely influential final report in 2015, which described what took place at the institutions as cultural genocide and included 94 calls to action. Education is the key to reconciliation, Sinclair said. Education got us into this mess, and education will get us out of it. 2 years later, he and other commissioners received the Meritorious Service Cross for their work. It was one of many recognitions Sinclair received over his career. He was given National Aboriginal Achievement Award, now the Inspire Awards, in the field of justice in 1994. In 2017, he received a Lifetime Achievement Award from the organization. He was also awarded the Manitoba Bar Association's Equality Award in 2001 and the Canadian Bar Association President's Medal in 2018. In 2016, Sinclair was appointed to the Senate. He retired from that role in 2021. The following year, he received the Order of Canada for dedicating his life to championing Indigenous peoples' rights and freedoms. In accepting that honor, Sinclair said he wanted to show the country that working on Indigenous issues requires a national effort. When I speak to young people, I always tell them that we all have a responsibility to do the best that we can and to be the best that we can be, he said. Sinclair limited his public engagement in recent years due to declining health. In his memoir, Sinclair described living with congestive heart failure. Nerve damage led to him relying on a wheelchair. His family said in a previous statement that he had been in hospital for the last few months. Sinclair spoke at the 2023 swearing-in ceremony of Manitoba Premier Wab Kinew, the First Nations person to lead a province. Sinclair called the milestone Manitoba's true act of reconciliation that would usher in a new phase. That phase ultimately is going to lead to a relationship between Indigenous and non-Indigenous people in which we are able to show true respect to all of those who are here and all of those who come here. Sinclair's memoir was released in September. In it, he continued to challenge Canadians to take action. We know that making things better will not happen overnight. It will take generations. That's how the damage was created, and that's how the damage will be fixed, Sinclair wrote. But if we agree on the objective of reconciliation and agree to work together, the work we do today will immeasurably strengthen the social fabric of Canada tomorrow.
ਕੈਨੇਡਾ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਮੂਲ ਨਿਵਾਸੀ ਭਾਈਚਾਰੇ ਦੀ ਬੁਲੰਦ ਆਵਾਜ਼ ਤੇ ਚਾਨਣ ਮਨਾਰਾ ਸੈਨਕਲੇਅਰ, ਜਿਸ ਦੀ ਪੈਦਾਇਸ਼ 1951 ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਹੋਈ ਸੀ, ਇਸ ਸੰਸਾਰ ਨੂੰ ਅਲਵਿਦਾ ਆਖ ਗਿਆ। ਪਰ ਆਪਣੇ ਪੂਰੇ ਜੀਵਨ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਉਸਨੇ ਜੋ ਕਾਰਗੁਜ਼ਾਰੀ ਕੀਤੀ ਔਰ ਮੂਲ ਨਿਵਾਸੀ ਭਾਈਚਾਰੇ ਦੇ ਹੱਕਾਂ ਲਈ ਅਣਥੱਕ ਮਿਹਨਤ ਕੀਤੀ, ਲੜਾਈ ਕੀਤੀ ਔਰ ਕਾਮਯਾਬ ਹੋਇਆ, ਉਸ ਦੀਆਂ ਪ੍ਰਾਪਤੀਆਂ ਬੇਅੰਤ ਨੇ। ਪਹਿਲਾ ਮੂਲ ਨਿਵਾਸੀ ਭਾਈਚਾਰੇ ਦਾ ਵਿਅਕਤੀ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਆਪਣੀ ਕਮਿਊਨਿਟੀ ਦੀ ਸ਼ਾਨ ਪੜ੍ਹਨ ਤੋਂ ਉਪਰੰਤ ਜੱਜ ਬਣਿਆ ਔਰ ਸੈਨੇਟਰ ਬਣਿਆ ਔਰ ਰੀਕਨਸਾਈਲੇਸ਼ਨ ਦਾ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਪੂਰਾ ਦਾ ਪੂਰਾ ਮੁੱਦਾ ਉਸਨੇ ਆਪਣੇ ਮੋਢਿਆਂ ਤੇ ਚੱਕਿਆ ਔਰ ਬੇਅੰਤ ਲੋਕਾਂ ਦੀ ਹੱਡ ਬੀਤੀ ਸੁਣੀ ਉਸ ਕਮਿਸ਼ਨ ਦੇ ਉਚੇਰ ਸਨ। ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਜਾਣ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਨਿਰਸਨ ਦੇ ਮੂਲ ਨਿਵਾਸੀ ਭਾਈਚਾਰੇ ਨੂੰ ਵੱਡਾ ਘਾਟਾ ਪਿਆ, ਪਰ ਇਸ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਨਾਲ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਇਹ ਕਹਿਣਾ ਕਿ ਜੋ ਇਹ ਸਮੱਸਿਆ ਹੈ, ਇਸ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਜ਼ਿਆਦਾ ਪੜ੍ਹਾਈ ਕਰਕੇ ਇਸ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਫਸੇ ਆ ਤੇ ਇਸ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚੋਂ ਨਿਕਲਣ ਲਈ ਵੀ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਰਾਹ ਹੈ ਮੂਲ ਨਿਵਾਸੀ ਭਾਈਚਾਰੇ ਨੂੰ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਕਿਹਾ ਕਿ ਉਹ ਐਜੂਕੇਸ਼ਨ ਹੀ ਹੈ। ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਜਾਣ ਦਾ ਨਿਰਸਨ ਦੇ ਕੈਨੇਡੀਅਨ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਸਫੇਅਰ ਹੈ ਉਸ ਨੂੰ ਬਹੁਤ ਵੱਡਾ ਘਾਟਾ ਪਿਆ ਹੈ।
Canada braces for impact of US election on immigration. As Americans head to the polls, Canadian officials and immigration experts are closely watching for potential impacts on Canada's immigration policies. Canada's border with the United States, the longest undefended border globally, reflects a relationship that significantly influences both countries' policies, especially around immigration. According to Dr. Dawn Abelson, a political science professor at McMaster University, Canadian policymakers are actually aware of how U.S. immigration decisions, especially under Trump administration, could put pressure on Canada's immigration system. Canada is certainly concerned about the thousands of asylum seekers who might enter the United States and then decide it's probably better for them to continue moving north, Abelson said. Abelson explained that if Donald Trump were re-elected, his aggressive stance on immigration and mass deportations could force Canada to prepare for increased number of asylum seekers seeking refuge across the border. According to the data from Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship Canada, irregular arrivals rose from 2,434 in 2016 to 20,593 in 2017, with most arriving by land in Quebec, pushing locations like Roxham Road into the spotlight. Abelson also pointed out that while both Trump and Kamala Harris consider immigration a critical issue, they approach it from fundamentally different perspectives. Trump's natural response is rooted in anger and vitriol, he said, describing Trump's policies as divisive and focused on quick deportations. By contrast, Harris' approach is rooted in political and social accommodation with a more humane perspective on border issues. Abelson explained that Canadian policymakers would likely find it far more comfortable working with the Harris administration on these issues due to shared principles around dignity in processing and integration. Interest in moving to Canada is rising once again among Americans concerned about potential shifts in U.S. policy. While discussions of moving north often surge during election cycles, Mario Bellissimo, a Toronto-based immigration lawyer and certified specialist in citizenship and immigration law and refugee protection, said the actual number of Americans making the move tends to fall short of initial interest. For the last several presidential elections, we've noticed a spike in inquiries, Bellissimo said. In 2016, after Trump's election, the interest was very high, but the actual numbers of individuals that actioned those intentions is never as high as what it's expressed initially. Data from Immigration, Refugee and Citizenships Canada shows that 88,830 U.S. citizens have gained permanent residency in Canada since 2015. Any Trump bump in immigration after the 2016 U.S. elections appears to have been modest. This year, however, with talk of stricter immigration laws and mass deportations in the U.S., Bellissimo reports an increase in inquiries. There's a lot of talk about mass deportation in this election, he said. We've been receiving a lot of inquiries related to the rhetoric. Bellissimo added that either candidate's policies could impact Americans' interest in Canadian residency, with motivations that range from family needs to political and economic concerns. We are getting inquiries from skilled workers, students, families, and some think Canada is just an extension of the U.S. where they can come and work without needing special authorization, he said. Canada's immigration system is already under strain and new challenges are emerging as the Liberal government recently announced significant cuts to immigration targets to alleviate pressure on housing, the labour market and public service. This move also makes the immigration process more competitive and selective for U.S. applicants compared to previous years. Canada is already managing over 200,000 cases in the refugee backlog alone. He said it will put pressure on any Canadian government to quickly mobilize and create policies to really wade through what could be potentially large numbers. Asked in the House of Commons last week if Canada has a plan should a U.S. election trigger a flood of immigration, Immigration Minister Mark Miller simply responded yes. Bellissimo said he believes the Canadian government is already preparing contingency plans to handle a potential influx of applications from the U.S. We've never seen that tsunami everyone fears after the U.S. elections, he said. We certainly haven't experienced that yet from a presidential election. But there's always a first time and we can't underestimate the possibility. With the potential for future policy shifts on both sides of the border, Canada's approach to immigration remains adaptable but cautious. Whether it's immigration, foreign policy, or environmental cooperation, Canada and the U.S. will navigate both shared interests and challenges within a complex bilateral relationship, Abelson concluded, underscoring the importance of careful planning and coordination in facing future cross-border dynamics.
ਅਮਰੀਕਾ ਵਿਖੇ ਹੋਣ ਵਾਲੀਆਂ ਰਾਸ਼ਟਰਪਤੀ ਚੁਣਨ ਦੀਆਂ ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ ਚੋਣਾਂ ਨੇ ਜਿਸ ਦੇ ਡੋਨਲਡ ਟਰੰਪ ਤੇ ਕੈਮਾਲਾ ਹੈਰਿਸ ਨੇ ਉਹ ਬਿਲਕੁਲ ਸਿਰ ਦੇ ਉੱਤੇ ਹੈ ਪਰ ਇਸ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਨਾਲ ਚਰਚੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਨੇ ਹੋਰ ਵੀ ਬਹੁਤ ਜ਼ਿਆਦਾ ਛਿੜ ਗਏ ਨੇ ਕਿ ਦੋਵੇਂ ਕੈਂਡੀਡੇਟਸ ਡੋਨਲਡ ਟਰੰਪ ਤੇ ਕੈਮਾਲਾ ਹੈਰਿਸ ਦੀਆਂ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਨਜ਼ਰੀਆ ਹੈ ਇਮੀਗ੍ਰੇਸ਼ਨ ਬਾਰੇ ਕੀ ਹੈ ਇਮੀਗ੍ਰੇਸ਼ਨ ਦੇ ਜਿੱਥੇ ਗੱਲ ਆਉਂਦੀ ਹੈ ਤੇ ਗੁਆਂਢੀ ਮੁਲਕ ਹੋਣ ਦੇ ਕਾਰਨ ਮੈਂ ਯਾਦ ਰਿਹਾ ਕਿ ਅਮਰੀਕਾ ਦੇ ਕੈਨੇਡਾ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਸਭ ਤੋਂ ਲੰਬਾ ਅਨਪ੍ਰੋਟੈਕਟਡ ਬਾਰਡਰ ਹੈ ਜਿਸ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਦੋਵੇਂ ਦੇਸ਼ਾਂ ਦੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਸੰਬੰਧ ਨੇ ਆਪਸ ਵਿੱਚ ਹੀ ਉਹ ਵੀ ਬਿਹਤਰੀਨ ਨੇ ਪਰ ਨਾਲ ਦੀ ਨਾਲ ਖਦਸ਼ਾ 2016 ਤੇ 17 ਦਾ ਹਵਾਲਾ ਦਿੰਦੇ ਹੋਏ ਇਹ ਵੀ ਜ਼ਾਹਰ ਕੀਤਾ ਜਾਂਦਾ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਉਦੋਂ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਅਸਾਈਲਮ ਸੀਕਰ ਰਿਫਿਊਜੀ ਦੇ ਤੌਰ ਦੇ ਉੱਤੇ ਕੈਨੇਡਾ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਰਹਿਣ ਦੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਅਧਿਕਾਰ ਨੇ ਉਹ ਲੈਣ ਦੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਕੇਸਸ ਸੀ ਉਹ ਸੁਨਾਮੀ ਦੀ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਵੱਧ ਗਏ ਸਨ ਕਿ ਹੁਣ ਵੀ ਇਸ ਪ੍ਰਕਾਰ ਦਾ ਹੋ ਸਕਦਾ ਹੈ ਜਿਸ ਦੇ ਉੱਤੇ ਕਿ ਬੇਅੰਤ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਮਾਹਰ ਨੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਵਿਚਾਰ ਪ੍ਰਗਟਾਏ ਨੇ। ਪਰ ਦੇਖਦੇ ਹਾਂ ਅਮਰੀਕਾ ਦੇ ਰਾਸ਼ਟਰਪਤੀ ਦੀ ਚੋਣ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਕਿਹੜਾ ਕੈਂਡੀਡੇਟ ਹੈ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਰਾਸ਼ਟਰਪਤੀ ਬਣਦਾ, ਔਰ ਇਮੀਗ੍ਰੇਸ਼ਨ ਦਾ ਕੈਨੇਡਾ ਦੇ ਉੱਤੇ ਸਟਰਕਚਰ ਦੇ ਉੱਤੇ ਉਹਦਾ ਕੀ ਪ੍ਰਭਾਵ ਪੈਂਦਾ। ਮੰਤਰਾਲਾ ਮੰਤਰੀ ਨੇ ਕਿਹਾ ਕਿ ਉਹ ਤਿਆਰ ਨੇ।
Oliver asked premiers to axe their sales taxes on new homes worth under $1 million. Conservative leader Pierre Oliver has written to the province's premiers asking them to eliminate their sales tax on new homes that are under $1 million. It follows Oliver's own pledge last week that if he becomes Prime Minister, he will axe the federal sales tax on new homes sold for under $1 million. The Conservative estimated that measure would reduce the cost of an $800,000 home by $40,000 and spur construction of another 30,000 homes per year. Oliver said last week that he would pay for the federal tax cut by scrapping liberal housing policies, and in his letter to premiers, he said provincial sales tax also significantly increased the cost of homes. He tells the premiers he understands that all provinces are different, but that by matching his own promised tax cut on new homes, they will save their residents tens of thousands of dollars. Oliver has relentlessly attacked the Liberal government over the state of housing affordability, blaming Prime Minister Justin Trudeau for the rapid rise of housing prices and rents since 2015.
ਕੰਜ਼ਰਵੇਟਿਵ ਪਾਰਟੀ ਆਫ ਕੈਨੇਡਾ ਦੇ ਮੁਖੀ ਪੋਲੀਵਰ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਇਸ ਗੱਲ ਦਾ ਐਲਾਨ ਕੀਤਾ ਕਿ ਅਗਰ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੀ ਪਾਰਟੀ ਸਰਕਾਰ ਬਣਾਉਂਦੀ ਹੈ ਤਾਂ 1 ਮਿਲੀਅਨ ਤੋਂ ਥੱਲੇ ਦੇ ਘਰ ਨੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਨਵੇਂ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਲੋਕ ਖਰੀਦਣਗੇ ਉਸ ਦੇ ਉੱਪਰ ਉਹ ਫੈਡਰਲ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਟੈਕਸ ਹੈ ਉਸ ਨੂੰ ਖਤਮ ਕਰ ਦੇਣਗੇ। ਇਹ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਵਾਅਦਾ ਕੀਤਾ ਤੇ ਨਾਲ ਦੀ ਨਾਲ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਸੂਬਾ ਸਰਕਾਰਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਵੀ ਚਿੱਠੀ ਲਿਖ ਕੇ ਕਿਹਾ ਕਿ ਫੈਡਰਲ ਸਰਕਾਰ ਅਗਰ ਇਹ ਕਰੇਗੀ ਤਾਂ ਸੂਬਾ ਸਰਕਾਰ ਵੀ ਆਪਣੇ ਹਿੱਸੇ ਦਾ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਟੈਕਸ ਕੱਟ ਹੈ ਉਸ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਕਟੌਤੀ ਕਰੇ ਤਾਂ ਕਿ ਲੋਕਾਂ ਦੇ ਲਈ ਘਰ ਖਰੀਦਣੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਨੇ ਉਹ ਆਸਾਨ ਹੋ ਜਾਣ। ਔਰ ਇਸੇ ਵਕਤ ਦੇ ਉੱਤੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਮੌਜੂਦਾ ਸਰਕਾਰ ਫੈਡਰਲ ਲਿਬਰਲ ਪਾਰਟੀ ਦੇ ਉੱਤੇ ਨਿਸ਼ਾਨਾ ਸਾਧਦੇ ਇਹ ਵੀ ਗੱਲ ਕਿਹਾ ਕਿ 2015 ਤੋਂ ਬਾਅਦ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦੀ ਕਾਰਗੁਜ਼ਾਰੀ ਕਰਕੇ ਘਰਾਂ ਦੀਆਂ ਕੀਮਤਾਂ ਬਿਲਕੁਲ ਹੀ ਅਫੋਰਡ ਨਾ ਕਰ ਸਕਣ ਦੇ ਮਿਆਰ ਦੇ ਉੱਤੇ ਪਹੁੰਚੀਆਂ ਹੋਈਆਂ ਨੇ।
India's Modi, Canada's Trudeau condemned violence at Hindu temple near Toronto. The Prime Ministers of India and Canada condemned violence and broke out on Sunday at a Hindu temple near Toronto at a time of escalating diplomatic tensions between the two countries. Videos posted on social media appeared to show people hitting each other with flagpoles and throwing punches in the Toronto suburb of Brampton. It was unclear who instigated the violence, and Reuters could not independently verify what happened. The incident happened weeks after Ottawa expelled 6 Indian diplomats, linking them to the killing of Sikh separatist leader in 2023 in Canada. It has accused the Indian government of conducting a broad campaign against South Asian dissidents in Canada, something New Delhi denies. The local Peel police said on Monday that 3 people faced criminal charges over Sunday's protest without providing further details. Several acts of unlawfulness continue to be actively investigated, the police said in a statement. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi issued a strongly worded statement on acts on Monday. I strongly condemn the deliberate attack on a Hindu temple in Canada. Equally appalling are the cowardly attempts to intimidate our diplomats, Modi said. Such acts of violence will never weaken India's resolve. We expect the Canadian government to ensure justice and uphold the rule of law, he said. His Canadian counterpart, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, said on Sunday the acts of violence were unacceptable. India has accused Trudeau of pursuing a political agenda in their dispute and responded to Ottawa's expulsion of its diplomats by expelling 6 Canadian diplomats. The North America-based activist group Seek for Justice said on Sunday that pro-Khalistan Sikhs who were peacefully demonstrating were violently attacked by a group of Indo-Canadians. Indian media reported that an Indian consular camp at the venue was targeted in the violence. The Foreign Ministry in New Delhi said the violence was perpetrated by extremists and separatists. The ministry said it remained deeply concerned about the safety and security of Indian nationals in Canada.
ਕੱਲ ਬ੍ਰੈਂਪਟਨ ਵਿਖੇ ਹੋਏ ਝਗੜਿਆਂ ਦੇ ਮੁਤਲਕ ਭਾਰਤ ਦੇ ਪ੍ਰਧਾਨ ਮੰਤਰੀ ਮੋਦੀ ਅਤੇ ਕੈਨੇਡਾ ਦੇ ਪ੍ਰਧਾਨ ਮੰਤਰੀ ਜਸਟਿਨ ਟਰੂਡੋ ਨੇ ਇਸ ਵਾਇਲੈਂਸ ਦੀ ਹਿੰਸਕ ਵਾਰਦਾਤ ਦੀ ਸਖਤ ਲਫ਼ਜ਼ਾਂ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਨਿਖੇਧੀ ਕੀਤੀ ਹੈ। ਜਿੱਥੇ ਪ੍ਰਧਾਨ ਮੰਤਰੀ ਜਸਟਿਨ ਟਰੂਡੋ ਨੇ ਕਿਹਾ ਕਿ ਇਹ ਹਿੰਸਕ ਵਾਰਦਾਤਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਬਰਦਾਸ਼ਤ ਨਹੀਂ ਕੀਤਾ ਜਾਣਾ ਚਾਹੀਦਾ, ਨਹੀਂ ਕੀਤਾ ਜਾਏਗਾ, ਉੱਥੇ ਨਾਲ ਦੀ ਨਾਲ ਭਾਰਤ ਦੇ ਪ੍ਰਧਾਨ ਮੰਤਰੀ ਨਰਿੰਦਰ ਮੋਦੀ ਹੋਰਾਂ ਨੇ ਵੀ ਇਸ ਗੱਲ ਦੀ ਮੰਗ ਕੀਤੀ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਕੈਨੇਡਾ ਸਰਕਾਰ ਇਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਦੀਆਂ ਹਿੰਸਕ ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ ਗਤੀਵਿਧੀਆਂ ਨੇ, ਮੰਦਰ ਦੇ ਉੱਤੇ ਲੋਕਾਂ ਦੇ ਉੱਤੇ ਹਿੰਸਕ ਹਮਲੇ ਹੋਏ ਨੇ, ਉਸ ਦੇ ਮੁਤਲਕ ਸਖਤ ਕਦਮ ਚੁੱਕੇ। ਯਾਦ ਰਹੇ ਭਾਰਤ ਤੇ ਕੈਨੇਡਾ ਦੇ ਦਰਮਿਆਨ ਸੰਬੰਧਾਂ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਪਿਛਲੇ ਕੁਝ ਸਮੇਂ ਤੋਂ ਕਾਫੀ ਜ਼ਿਆਦਾ ਟੈਂਸ਼ਨ आई हुई है, जिसका भी जिक्र इस दे विच बार-बार हुंदा है।
इसी के साथ हमें दीजिएगा इजाजत। खबरां दा लेखा जोखा प्रोग्राम से until next time, goodbye and be safe।